Welcome to our cooking tutorial. Today we're going to be making a meringue. Our ingredients are egg whites and granulated white sugar. Making meringue is a fundamental for a lot of different desserts, soufflés, semifreddos, meringue pies, mousses, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about how to make a good stable meringue. And one of those misconceptions is starting to whip your egg whites and then slowly adding your sugar, which is completely contrary to the science. The best thing to do is let your egg whites come to room temperature or slightly cool, either by letting them sit out ahead of time, or if you don't want to do that, what you can do is you can take your pre-measured egg whites and your mixer bowl and put them over a bowl of hot water for a minute and stir with this whisk in your hand like this, and after about 5 or 10 seconds you can check with your finger and it will be slightly cool or maybe room temperature, which is ideal. So instead of drizzling sugar in, what we want to do is add our sugar all at once, and we start the mixer on low speed. And that's only so that we can get the sugar to dissolve completely by the time the meringue is completely whipped. So I'm just going to mix it for a few seconds, let the sugar dissolve a little bit before turning it up to high speed. And once I turn it up to whip the meringues to completion, I'm going to stop the machine periodically to show you the different stages of doneness. Because meringue, it can be whipped to different degrees of stiffness depending upon the application. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Our sugar is nice and dissolved now, or will be by the time it's completely whipped, so I'm going to turn the machine up all the way. You can see now that it's nice and frothy and it has increased in volume a lot, but it's not quite ready to be useful for most things, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is too runny, not really useful at this point. I just wanted to show you what it looks like at this stage. So the bare minimum stage for meringue to be whipped properly, to be useful, is by doing a test that consists of taking the whisk off the machine so that you can hold it straight up and down, push it straight down in the meringue, and then invert it. And if by doing that you have a dollop that sticks straight up and down without bending over, then you know it's whipped to the bare minimum consistency for most things. So I'm going to stop the machine here and use it for one application, and then I'm going to continue to whip it more to be useful for a few other applications. Now that we're at this nice soft consistency, I'm shutting off the machine so that I can take this lemon tartlet and invert it and plunge it directly into the bowl. It's going to form a nice dollop top, not unlike what you saw on the whisk when I tested it moments ago. And after that, I'm going to continue to whip the meringue to a stiffer consistency to be useful for some other applications. Now we're going to continue whipping our meringue to a nice stiff consistency. And what that is going to look like is the whisk attachment is going to trap meringue inside of it by about 2/3. And that's a nice stiff texture that we can put into pastry bags to pipe out decorations that we can then dry out. We're also going to use meringue at that same consistency to pipe onto another lemon tart and then torch it just like you would a lemon meringue pie. Now, as you can see, this meringue is thickened up to the point where it's filling this whisk by 2/3. And this is nice and stable, and this is useful for a great many things whipped to this consistency. I don't have a pastry bag, so what I've done is I've cut the corners and Ziploc tops off of Ziploc storage bags and put some decorating tips in them. So I've got a star tip in one. I've got a regular round tip in another. And I've got a really small gauge round tip in this one, just to show you the various types of decorations that we can make for different purposes. I can make these different sizes. And if you don't have a pastry tip, but you have storage bags, what you can do is just cut off the corner of a bag and pipe decorations similar to this as well, and get good results. For this kind of decoration, you don't necessarily need a piping tip. And for these dollops right here, what I'm going to do is use the back of a spoon. I wet the spoon first in order to lubricate it, to create an indentation. And that indentation will allow me to fill these up with different things or use them as bases for different things after I dehydrate them. And so you can dehydrate these in an oven if it can go really low, like 160 degrees. If you've got a gas oven with a pilot light, you can just put it in and the pilot light will dehydrate these. If you have a food dehydrator, set it to the highest setting, which is generally 160 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to take our lemon meringue pie, and I'm just keeping it elevated on the back of a plate so that I don't damage the plate or my work surface when I go to torch it. And I'm going to use my hand torch now. There you go. You can also do this if you don't have a torch and you have a broiler in your oven, you can do it that way as well. But you want to make sure that your tart is nice and cold before you do that, and try and elevate it as close to the broiler without burning it as possible so that you don't heat up the tart too much. For this application, we're going to use our meringue to make a baked Alaska. And so what baked Alaska is it is a piece of cake. In this case, it's a piece of banana bread because that's what I have around. And I took a scoop of ice cream that I used. I don't have an ice cream scoop, so I wrapped it up in a piece of plastic wrap and then refroze it, because you want your ice cream to be frozen really solid so it doesn't melt when you torch the meringue. And in order to keep that ice cream in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of meringue on top of the cake first. And I'm going to pipe meringue around it that we are going to torch after for a classic dessert known as baked Alaska. So I over whipped the meringue a little bit to show you the different stages, and in order to get it back to a little bit of a softer and smoother consistency, I'm just working the pastry bag in my hands a little bit. And test a little bit of it. Okay. And since I don't have a fancy, expensive cake turntable, I'm using this plate inverted on top of a plastic quart container so I can turn it like this as I pipe the meringue with the pastry bag. And so I'm going to start around the sides like this. And then the top. And now I can use a offset spatula. I like to use have a little bit of water on the side to lubricate the spatula a little bit in order to completely cover the dessert and the meringue. So the cake serves a function, an important function in this dessert. What it does is it helps insulate the ice cream and keep it nice and cold. And the meringue does the same thing. So it keeps the ice cream cold so that when you torch this dessert, it doesn't melt the ice cream. And you can do whatever patterns you want on here if you want to put a decorating tip on it. That's it, baked Alaska. For our next application of meringue, we're going to make a pavlova. So pavlova is a meringue shell that has ice cream or whipped cream and fruits inside of it. And so we've already have our decorations that were piped out. I demonstrated this one earlier. I just piped out a dollop with a round tip and used the back of a wet spoon to make that depression in the top. And with that, I'm going to put the ice cream inside and then use some of our decorations. To completely cover it. And you can use whatever shapes you want that we went over earlier or a combination. I'll just demonstrate with a few different ones here. We also have some raspberries here that we'll use as well. And we happen to have some lemon balm here. We have some fresh chamomile too, so I'm going to take a chamomile bud and microplane that over the top a little bit. And something else that we have that I am a really big fan of is freeze-dried fruit. So I've got a freeze-dried raspberries here as well. And that's our finished pavlova.